Am I overthinking, AIO, or is my boyfriend manipulative? This is how it always is with him. The fight started, as usual, after he'd been drinking. We had just finished watching a movie. He said he didn't like it, that it was more my type of movie, and that I should pick something he'd enjoy. So I did. But then he decided he wasn't in the mood for the next movie I chose either. He said I was selfish and should know what kind of movie he would feel like watching without having to ask. I told him, as calmly as I could, that I'm not a mind reader. I cannot always guess what kind of movie he might want to watch at any given moment, and if he could at least give me a genre or some clue, it would help. That is when it started. The berating, the accusations, the endless cycle of blame. He said I do not care for him, that I am selfish, and that I never pay attention to what he wants. This kind of thing happens all the time. It is not just about movies. I am expected to know what food he wants, what music he feels like listening to, what mood he is in, all without him saying a word. If I guess wrong, which, let's be real, I always do, he will find an issue with anything I choose. It becomes my fault. He gets mad, says I don't love him or care enough to know him, and goes on, tearing me down in ways that feel so personal and deliberate. That night, though, I had enough. I stood up for myself, not angrily, not in a mean way, because he is already mean enough for the both of us. He constantly tells me I am stupid, that he is smarter and more capable, so I should just listen to him. This time, I tried to calmly explain how I felt, that I do not agree with the awful things he says about me, and that if he has a problem with me, we could talk about it in a more productive, kinder way. His response? He pulled out a notebook, a literal notebook. He said he was going to keep a tally of every time I played the victim. Each time I tried to share my thoughts or feelings, he would make a mark on the page. He even made a section for himself, but of course he never marked it when he aired his grievances about me. I told him it was unfair and ridiculous, so I grabbed my own pen and started keeping track of every time he insulted me or dismissed my feelings. That was when he completely lost it. He got angrier, louder, and started talking over me, telling me to fuck off. I walked upstairs, hoping to cool off, but he kept going, this time through texts. Here's the thing I have learned with him. Unless I fully agree with every insult he throws at me, agree that I am this horrible, dumb, unworthy person, he just keeps getting angrier. And when he is mad, he makes me pay for it for days. This time, he said I needed to pay penance by sleeping outside, in Canada, in January. It has been 2 days now and he is still furious. He keeps bringing up this story of the scorpion and the frog, calling me the scorpion who cannot help but sting and ruin everything. He swings between telling me to fuck off and accusing me of playing the victim whenever I try to respond. He says I am not cleaning up the mess I made, even though I am in the other room, trying to stay out of his way. When I apologize and promise to do better, he dismisses me entirely. Nothing I do is ever enough. And I'm still sitting here, trying to figure out what I did wrong. All I did was reply, calmly, reasonably, to the mean things he was saying. I tried to tell him how I felt, how I have been feeling unheard and unloved. He turned that into more evidence against me, saying I am neurodivergent, and that is why I just don't get it. He calls me a terrible girlfriend and a terrible person. The worst part? He genuinely believes this is all my fault. He never sees the double standard, how he gets away with saying and doing things that he would completely lose his mind over if I even attempted them. He does not do anything for me. Nothing. He cannot even put his trash away most of the time. But when he fills up the ice tray one single time, he acts like he deserves a medal for being the best partner ever. Anytime I try to point any of this out, even gently, he shuts me down. He gets mad, talks over me, and starts insulting me. He claims he has never done anything wrong in our relationship, and on the rare occasion that he might have, it is somehow still my fault. I am so tired. Screenshot. Comments. You know that you've given far too much to an absolute piece of shit. Simon, you know you deserve better than this. Even the way you respond to his texts, as if you're taking the blame and acknowledging faults you shouldn't be acknowledging, is crazy. Please, do better for yourself. That's how it went the first and only time I told my mother she had emotionally abused and manipulated me my whole childhood. I always had to walk on eggshells, so I knew to be very careful with how I approached it. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't call her names, I didn't swear. I simply told her how her actions made me feel as a child and how it affects me now. The whole thing was turned around on me and how I was a difficult child, and that I am the abusive one for saying these things. It's classic manipulation and emotional abuse, hun. Please leave him as soon as possible. I know it's scary. I know sometimes it feels like it's better to be abused than be alone or start over with someone else. You don't deserve this. You will be okay. Best of luck. Holy hell. Look, I'm a 43-year-old happily married dude with a kid in pre-K. I also have a sister who's a little more than 10 years younger than I. Now, thankfully, her hubs is fucking awesome, and I'm so glad he's a member of our family. But prior, she dated a dude that bitched about her to me once. Just petty stuff. And I had to basically remind him who he was speaking to, and that I wasn't one of his bros he could talk shit about my sister to. And if I'm being honest, he was one more sentence away from losing some teeth, and I think he realized that because he shut the fuck up pretty instantly. I can say if she ever intimated that a guy she was with put hands on her, I'd not be married or have a child because I'd be in prison. No one who gives any amount of fucks about you would ever put their hands on you in a way that isn't tender and loving. Period. Get away from this dickbag as fast as you fucking can. I may not know you at all, but I do know you deserve infinitely better than this bitch of a man. There's never a valid excuse. You don't deserve to be treated that way, not even for an instant. And don't ever let anyone, yourself included, try to convince you otherwise. Update 1. 3 days after the original post. After posting, I spent a lot of time overthinking. You know that kind of mental spiral where you replay every fight, every moment, and start questioning if maybe you are the problem? That was me. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized there's a pattern with him. It's not just about fights over movies or stupid things. It's the way he always twists everything to make me feel like I'm the one in the wrong, no matter what. So, I decided to bring it up. I didn't want to argue. I just wanted to talk. To at least understand why he acts like this. I waited until he was in a good mood, because God forbid I say anything when he's not. And I said something like, "Hey, can we talk about the way we've been arguing lately? It's been bothering me." His first reaction? He laughed. Like, actually laughed. He said, "Oh my God, you're so dramatic. Why do you always have to make a big deal out of nothing?" After posting, I spent a lot of time overthinking. You know that kind of mental spiral where you replay every fight, every moment, and start questioning if maybe you are the problem? That was me. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized there's a pattern with him. It's not just about fights over movies or stupid things. It's the way he always twists everything to make me feel like I'm the one in the wrong, no matter what. So, I decided to bring it up. I didn't want to argue. I just wanted to talk to at least understand why he acts like this. I waited until he was in a good mood, because God forbid I say anything when he's not. And I said something like, "Hey, can we talk about the way we've been arguing lately? It's been bothering me." His first reaction? He laughed. Like, actually laughed. He said, "Oh my God, you're so dramatic. Why do you always have to make a big deal out of nothing?" The next day, he acted like nothing had happened. No apology, no acknowledgement. Instead, he sent me random texts asking me to pick up groceries and reminding me to pay the internet bill, like everything was fine. I ignored most of it, but when I got home, he was sitting on the couch like some king waiting for his servant. Then, out of nowhere, he goes, "By the way, I hope you learned something from our little chat. It's not easy being with someone like you. You've got a lot to work on." I wanted to scream. I didn't, though. I just stared at him, feeling this mix of anger, sadness, and honestly, shame. Because deep down, there's still this tiny voice in my head that wonders if he's right. Maybe I am hard to love. Maybe I do make things difficult. And that thought just makes me feel so small. I haven't brought it up again since then. I can't. I feel like every time I try to stand up for myself or even have a normal conversation about how I feel, he twists it and turns it into another reason why I'm the problem. It's exhausting. and I don't know how much more I can take. Part of me wants to leave, but where would I even go? He's drilled it into my head so many times that I couldn't make it on my own, and the worst part is, I'm starting to believe him. It's like I'm stuck in this fog where nothing feels real anymore, like I'm losing myself. I'll update again when I figure out what to do next. For now, I'm just trying to survive one day at a time. This whole situation has me questioning everything, and I'm not sure how much longer I can keep doing this. Update 2. 5 days after Update 1. First off, I want to say I have been genuinely overwhelmed by the support and advice many of you have given. It is a lot to process, but your words have made me realize I cannot keep brushing off the red flags like they are nothing. For that, I am incredibly grateful. Now on to what has happened. Over the past few days, I have been trying to keep my distance from him, not physically. It is hard when you live together, but emotionally. I have been watching him closely, taking mental notes of the way he talks to me, the way he reacts to the smallest things. I told myself I needed to stop second-guessing everything he says and actually listen to my gut for once. Yesterday, something strange happened. He told me he was heading out to grab a few beers with a friend, which is not unusual for him. But before he left, he made a big show of reminding me to clean up the kitchen. It was condescending, as always, and left me biting my tongue to avoid a fight. When he finally walked out the door, I felt this huge wave of relief. I could breathe again, even if just for a little while. That is when I saw his notebook. The same stupid notebook he used to keep track of every time I supposedly played the victim. It was sitting on the coffee table, half buried under a pile of his stuff. For a moment, I hesitated. I am not the type of person to go through someone else's things, but something about that notebook had been nagging at me since he started using it. I told myself I just wanted to see if he had written anything about our last argument. I wanted to understand his perspective, if he even had one.
What I found instead shook me to my core.
The first few pages were what I expected. Random tallies and notes about me overreacting or being too sensitive. But as I flipped further, the tone of the entries changed. He had started writing down ways to control my emotions. There were actual plans, like bullet points, on how to manipulate me. One page had a list of things he had done to intentionally upset me, followed by notes on how I had reacted. Things like,
Ignored her for 2 days, she apologized first.
told her she is selfish for picking the wrong movie, she cried but said sorry.
Complained about her cooking, she got quiet but made me something else.
I felt sick reading it. He had been tracking my behavior, almost like an experiment. On another page, he wrote about testing me, testing my loyalty, testing my patience, testing how far he could push me. One line stood out so clearly it felt like a slap in the face. Break her down so she does not leave. I could not believe what I was seeing. For a long time, I had thought his behavior was just him being impulsive or lashing out when he was upset. But this was calculated. Cold. Cruel. He had been deliberately making me feel small, worthless, and dependent on him, and then sitting back to analyze the results. The worst part was realizing how well it had worked. Every time I doubted myself, every time I apologized for things that were not my fault, every time I stayed quiet just to avoid a fight, I was playing right into his hands. I spent hours sitting there, staring at that notebook, trying to piece together all the moments in our relationship where he had made me feel like the bad guy. It was not a coincidence.
None of it was. This was not some childish game or petty tactic. This was manipulation at its finest.
When he came home later that night, I was still trying to act normal. I could not let him know I had seen it. If he found out, I do not know what he would do. He has never handled being called out well, and I was not in the mood to endure one of his rants or, God forbid, anything worse. But now I am stuck. I know the truth about him, and it is terrifying. I know I cannot confront him, at least not yet. I feel like I am walking on eggshells more than ever, trying to figure out my next move. I keep replaying everything I read in that notebook, and it makes me want to scream. How did I let things get this far? How did I not see it before? Right now, I am focusing on staying safe. I do not know what comes next, but I know I cannot keep living like this. I have started quietly reaching out to people I trust, just in case I need to leave quickly. I do not want to panic, but I also do not want to underestimate him. I will update again when I have more to share. For now, I am just trying to hold it together and figure out the best way to protect myself. Thank you for reading and for making me feel less alone in all of this. Update 3. 6 days after Update 2. I wish I could say things have gotten clearer or easier since my last update, but the truth is, everything has gotten so much worse. After finding that notebook, I knew I could not keep pretending everything was normal. I had to confront him. I had to know why someone who claimed to love me could do something so calculated and cruel. When I finally decided to bring it up, I waited until he was calm and in a seemingly good mood. I told myself to approach it rationally, to keep my emotions in check, because that is the only way he ever engages in a conversation without blowing up. I started by saying, "I found your notebook." He froze for a second before recovering quickly, pretending not to know what I was talking about. "What notebook?" he asked, his voice casual but with an edge of suspicion. I described it, the one where he had been writing down every insult, every manipulation, every twisted plan to break me down. His face changed. He laughed, but it was not the kind of laugh you hear when someone finds something genuinely funny. It was sharp, almost mocking. "You are imagining things," he said. "You are so paranoid, always looking for problems where there are none." But I was prepared for that. I pulled out the notebook. I had taken photos of the pages before confronting him just in case, and flipped it open to one of the pages where he had explicitly written about breaking me down. I held it out to him and said, "This is what I'm talking about. How do you explain this?" His expression shifted again, the fake amusement draining from his face. He stared at the page, and for a split second I thought he was going to apologize or at least try to explain. Instead, he shrugged and said, "What did you expect? Look at how weak you are. You cannot even handle a little push without falling apart. I had to do something." I was stunned. He blamed me. He said I was too soft, too emotional, and that his actions were necessary because I was not strong enough to handle a real relationship. "You make it impossible to talk to you like a normal person," he said. "You turn everything into a big deal. You force me to act this way because you cannot handle the truth." I could not believe what I was hearing. He was not even trying to deny it anymore. He was justifying it, turning it around on me like it was somehow my fault. It felt like a slap in the face, but at the same time, it was almost a relief. For once, he was not pretending to be the victim. He was showing exactly who he was. The confrontation ended in silence. He grabbed his coat and walked out without another word, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I sat there for what felt like hours, trying to make sense of everything. Part of me wanted to cry, but I was too numb to even process what had just happened. Later that night, I got a message from someone I never expected to hear from, his best friend. To be honest, I have never spoken to him much. He always seemed nice enough but distant, like he did not want to get involved in our relationship. The message started with, "I do not know if I should be telling you this, but..." And what followed made my stomach drop. He told me that my boyfriend had done the same thing to his ex. The manipulation, the gaslighting, the emotional abuse, it was all the same. "I thought he had changed," his friend wrote. "I really did. But it sounds like he is doing it again, and I am sorry for not saying something sooner." I sat there staring at my phone, the words blurring together. This was not an accident. This was not a one-time lapse in judgment. This was a pattern, a deliberate choice he had made, not just with me, but with someone else before me. And if I stayed, I would not be the last. The worst part is, I keep asking myself, do I even know who this person is? For so long, I believed the version of him he wanted me to see, the charming, funny, supportive boyfriend. But now, I am realizing that version of him was just as fake as everything else he has said and done. I have not seen him much since the confrontation. He has been avoiding me, and honestly, I am okay with that. It gives me space to think, to plan. I know I need to leave. There is no fixing this, no going back to the way things were. But the thought of starting over is terrifying. Where do I go? What do I say to the people around me who have no idea what has been going on? How do I explain why I stayed for so long when I knew deep down something was not right? I keep replaying his words in my head. You should feel lucky to have me. It makes me sick to think about how many times I actually believed that. How many times I let him convince me that I was not good enough, that I could not survive without him. But now, for the first time in years, I am starting to see the cracks in his lies. I'm starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, I deserve better. I know I need to be careful. He does not know I am planning to leave, and I want to keep it that way until I am ready. I have started reaching out to people I trust, slowly building a support system so I am not completely alone when I finally walk away. It feels like I am holding my breath, waiting for the right moment to make my move. I will update again soon when I have more to share. For now, I am just trying to stay strong and remind myself that this is not my fault. I am not the person he has made me out to be, and I will not let him keep me trapped in his lies any longer. Update 4. 10 days after Update 3. After everything that has happened, I knew I could not keep living the way I was. I had to take control of my life again. So I made the decision to move out of the apartment we shared. It was not easy, logistically or emotionally, but I knew it was the right thing to do. I waited until he was out of the house to pack my things. I kept it quick, taking only what I absolutely needed. I did not want him to come home and find me in the middle of it because I knew how that would go. Accusations, manipulation, maybe worse. Before I left a letter for him. Not an apology, not a plea for understanding, but a statement. I wrote that I knew I deserved better, that I was done letting him control me, and that I hoped he would take a long, hard look at himself and figure out why he feels the need to hurt the people who care about him. Walking out of that apartment felt surreal. For the first time in years, I was making a choice purely for myself. No compromises, no second guessing, just freedom. But that freedom came with its own weight. I had no idea what the future held, and I was terrified. Still, I told myself that even the uncertainty was better than staying in a place where I constantly felt small and broken. The first few days were rough. I stayed with a friend while I figured out my next steps. It felt strange to be in a space where I did not have to watch every word, every move, every breath. I kept waiting for a text from him, some angry message demanding to know where I was or why I had left, but it never came. Instead, there was silence, and that silence was both a relief and a reminder of how isolated I had become in that relationship. As the days went by, I started to feel lighter. I reached out to old friends I had lost touch with, people he had convinced me were bad influences or did not really care about me. To my surprise, many of them welcomed me back with open arms. I started spending time outside, doing little things I used to enjoy but had forgotten about, grabbing coffee at my favorite spot, taking long walks without having to explain where I was going, listening to music that made me feel alive instead of small. But just as I was beginning to feel like I could breathe again, something strange happened. Yesterday, I received a package in the mail. There was no return address, just my name scrawled on the front. For a moment, I thought it might be from a friend or family member, maybe something to cheer me up. But when I opened it, my stomach dropped. Inside was his notebook. The notebook. The same one I had found weeks ago, the one that had set everything into motion. There was a folded piece of paper tucked inside, with a single sentence written on it. There is more you do not know. I stared at the words, my mind racing. Was this a warning? A threat? A twisted attempt to keep control? Or was it some kind of apology, an acknowledgement of everything he had done? I had no way of knowing, and the ambiguity of it all left me unsettled. For a split second, I thought about opening the notebook, flipping through its pages to see if he had added anything since I left. But then I stopped myself. I realized that whatever was in that notebook, whatever truths he thought I still needed to know, it did not matter anymore. His words, his games, his manipulations, they no longer had power over me. So, I put the notebook in a drawer, out of sight and out of mind, and told myself I would not let it drag me back into the darkness I had fought so hard to leave behind. Now, I am focusing on moving forward. I have started looking for a place of my own, somewhere I can build a life that feels like mine again. It is not easy. Some days, the weight of everything still feels unbearable, and I catch myself doubting whether I made the right choice. But then I remember how it felt to walk on eggshells every day, to be told I was nothing, to feel like I was slowly disappearing. And I know I did the right thing. I do not know if this is the end of the story or just the beginning of another chapter. Maybe he will try to reach out, or maybe he will fade into the background like a bad memory. Either way, I am not looking back. For the first time in a long time, I am choosing myself. And that feels like a victory worth holding on to.